I never thought something as personal as my trauma would become someone else's success story. Back in high school, I wasn't exactly popular, but I had a solid group of friends who made things bearable. My name's Ethan, and I was the kind of kid who kept to himself most of the time. After everything that happened to my family when I was younger, I didn't like talking about my past much. I'd gone through a pretty rough childhood. My dad left when I was 10, my mom got sick soon after, and I spent years balancing school, part-time work, and taking care of her until she passed away during my sophomore year. It wasn't something I broadcasted. Only a few people knew the full story, and one of them was my best friend, Jenna. Jenna and I had been close since freshman year. She was funny, smart, and had this way of getting people to open up. We'd hang out almost every day after school, and when I finally told her about what happened to my mom, she cried. She told me she admired how strong I was and that I should write about it someday because, in her words, my story could inspire people. I laughed it off because the last thing I wanted was to use my mom's death as some kind of life lesson for others. But Jenna was ambitious. She had her whole life planned out. She wanted to get into Stanford, major in psychology, and change lives. She'd talk about it constantly, and honestly, I admired her drive. Senior year rolled around fast, and everyone was stressing over college essays. I remember staying up late with Jenna at her place, both of us writing and editing drafts for her applications. She'd ask me to proofread her essays sometimes because she said I had a good sense for emotional writing. I helped her tweak sentences, fix grammar, and cut unnecessary words. I never thought twice about it. I was proud of her. I didn't realize what she had actually done until months later. I applied to a couple of state schools nearby. My grades were decent, but without any big extracurriculars or connections, I wasn't expecting anything fancy. Jenna, on the other hand, applied everywhere: Stanford, Harvard, Yale, you name it. Then one day in February, I got a text from her saying she got into Stanford. Not just that, she got a full scholarship. I was thrilled for her. I even brought her flowers the next day. Everyone at school was congratulating her, and she was glowing. But then, something strange happened. One of our English teachers, Mrs. Beck, pulled me aside a few days later and said she was proud of me for being so open about my life. I was confused, but she smiled and said Jenna's essay had moved her to tears when Jenna shared it during class. I froze. I didn't remember Jenna sharing any essay in class, and I didn't remember writing one like that. Mrs. Beck said it was about a boy who lost his mother but found strength through friendship. My stomach dropped. The details, what Mrs. Beck described, sounded like my story. My exact story. The late-night hospital visits, the part-time job at the grocery store, the quote I told Jenna about trying to stay busy so I don't think too much. That was my life, not hers. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and left. The rest of the day, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, that maybe Jenna just drew inspiration from me. But later that night, I looked up Stanford's scholarship winners on their website, and there it was. A snippet from her essay was quoted in the article about her award. I read it over and over. The words were mine. The story was mine. Every line felt like a piece of my heart that she had repackaged into something that made her look heroic. The essay talked about how she lost her mother to illness but found purpose in helping others heal. It even mentioned my mom's favorite saying, "You can't control what happens to you, only how you respond." Jenna had written that down once when I told her about it. I sat there staring at the screen, shaking, feeling this weird mix of betrayal and disbelief. How could she take something so painful, so personal, and make it hers? And worse, how could she win money, recognition, and praise for it? I didn't confront her right away. I didn't even know how to. I tried to process it, but every time I saw her, smiling, surrounded by people congratulating her, I felt sick. She'd even thank me for always believing in her, and I wanted to scream. A few weeks later, during lunch, she started talking about how she was going to move to California and how she'd finally earned it. I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her what her essay was about. She went quiet, just for a moment, and then said it was personal. I pressed her again, and she said it was inspired by a friend's story, but she'd changed enough details to make it her own. My heart broke right there. She didn't even deny it. She said it so casually, like it wasn't a big deal. Like my trauma was some creative writing prompt she borrowed. I didn't say much, I just laughed. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything she'd ever said to me about honesty, about empathy, about doing good in the world. It all felt fake now. The next morning, she texted me saying she hoped I wasn't mad. She said she only did it because it was such a powerful story. That's when I realized she didn't see me as a friend anymore. I was just material. Just a means to an end. I didn't respond to her text. But what I did next ended up changing everything, and it's the part of this story I never told anyone, until now. I didn't go to school the next day. I told my mom's old friend who I lived with that I wasn't feeling well, but the truth was, I just couldn't stand the idea of seeing Jenna's face. Everywhere I looked online, people from our school were posting about her Stanford acceptance, tagging her, calling her inspiring. Even local news had shared a post about it. And all I could think was, they're congratulating her for my pain. It wasn't just jealousy, it was this deep, raw hurt, like someone had dug into my chest, stolen a part of me, and dressed it up as their own triumph. I kept going back to the website with her scholarship announcement, reading the same lines over and over, trying to convince myself I was mistaken. Maybe she had written something similar. Maybe I was overreacting. But every word screamed my truth. It wasn't interpretation, it was theft. I had told her things I hadn't told anyone, things I thought were safe between us. I told her about my mom's last week in the hospital, about how I used to leave my shift early just to hold her hand while she slept. That line asterisk, I learned to cherish silence, because silence was the only thing that didn't leave me asterisk that was mine. I'd said that exact sentence to Jenna one night when we were sitting in my car after work. She'd written it down in her phone notes. I remembered her typing. I remembered her saying, "That's beautiful, Ethan." And now it was in her essay, word for word, but credited to her imaginary self. The worst part was, I couldn't even tell anyone without sounding like I was just jealous. Who was going to believe me? She had the perfect image, straight-A student, charity volunteer, teacher's favorite. I was the quiet kid who worked at a grocery store and didn't join clubs. I wasn't the kind of guy people lined up to defend. But something inside me kept pushing. I couldn't let it go. So I started gathering proof. I dug through old text messages, voice notes, anything that showed I'd shared those details first. I even found screenshots from when I told her about my mom's saying, the one she quoted. I had sent it to her in a message almost 2 years ago. That night, I printed everything out, texts, screenshots, timestamps, and spread them on my desk. I stared at them for hours, wondering if it was even worth it. Maybe I should just let her have it. Maybe my mom would have wanted me to move on. But then I remembered my mom's voice, telling me, "Ethan, don't ever let someone rewrite your story." So, I made a decision. I emailed the Stanford admissions office. I didn't accuse Jenna outright, I just asked if they had any plagiarism verification for essays, explaining that I believed one of their admitted students had used parts of another person's real-life experiences as their own. I attached the screenshots and explained the similarities. I didn't use angry words. I was polite, factual, calm. I hit send at 2:47 a.m. and immediately regretted it. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. For days, I heard nothing. Jenna acted normal at school, like nothing had happened. She'd even wave at me in the hallways, all smiles. It made me sick. A week later, though, I got an email back. It was short, just to thank you for reaching out, and that the admissions committee would look into it. That was it. No reassurance, no follow-up. I thought maybe they'd just ignored it. Until 2 weeks later. Jenna didn't show up to school for 2 days. Everyone thought she was on a family trip or doing some Stanford-related interview. But on the 3rd day, she came back and she looked different. Her face was pale, her eyes puffy. She avoided everyone. People whispered, wondering what had happened. I didn't say a word. Later that afternoon, during lunch, she pulled me aside behind the gym. Her voice was shaking when she asked me if I'd said something. I didn't deny it. I told her the truth, that what she did was wrong, and I couldn't just sit back while she turned my story into her essay. For a second, she just stared at me. Then, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "You ruined my life." Like I was the villain in all this. She told me Stanford had contacted her about potential inconsistencies in her essay and that they'd paused her scholarship review. She was crying, saying she didn't mean to hurt me, that she just needed a story people could connect with. I asked her if she realized how insane that sounded. She said she'd panicked, that her own life wasn't emotional enough. She kept saying she thought I'd be proud of her. That line hit me harder than anything else. Proud of her? For what? Stealing my grief. I walked away without saying another word. That night, she spammed my phone with messages, apologies, guilt trips, everything. I didn't answer a single one. But what I didn't expect was how fast everything would spiral. 2 days later, someone from the school board called me into the office. They said Stanford had contacted them to verify a plagiarism complaint, and that it involved personal student data. I had to explain everything to the counselor, the principal, even Mrs. Beck. When I told them, their expressions shifted from disbelief to shock. Mrs. Beck said she had a copy of Jenna's essay because Jenna had shared it in an early draft for feedback. They compared the essay with my messages and notes, and it was undeniable. Jenna had used entire paragraphs from my life. Things I'd told her privately. It became official. The school launched a small investigation, and within a week, Stanford rescinded her offer. They didn't name me publicly, but everyone figured it out. Rumors spread fast. People whispered in the hallways. Some said I'd snitched. Others said she deserved it. But the truth was, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty. Watching Jenna walk through the halls, eyes red, silent, was hard. I'd loved her like a sister once. And now we couldn't even look at each other. The next week, she stopped coming to school. Her social media disappeared. And though I thought it was finally over, it wasn't. Because what came next would twist everything even more and make me question whether doing the right thing was really worth it. For a while, things went quiet after Jenna disappeared from school. People stopped talking about her as much, and graduation was coming up, so everyone shifted focus to prom, senior trips, and future plans. But even with all that noise, I couldn't shake off this heavy guilt. Every time I walked past the hallway where we used to sit and talk, my stomach twisted. I hadn't meant to ruin her future. I just wanted her to take responsibility. Still, the silence she left behind didn't feel like peace, it felt like something unfinished. About a month later, I got a message on Instagram from a mutual friend, Hannah. She sent a screenshot of Jenna's private post. It was one of those long, emotional captions over a black and white selfie. The post said she'd been betrayed by someone she trusted, that jealousy destroys lives, and that she made one mistake and lost everything. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew who she meant. The comments section was filled with people saying things like, "You didn't deserve this," and "Some people can't stand seeing others succeed." A few of my old classmates even unfollowed me after that. I could have defended myself, but I didn't. I didn't want to feed the drama. I just turned off my phone and went for a walk. But the thing about rumors is that they spread faster than the truth ever can. Within days, people at school started whispering again. Someone even scribbled "traitor" on my locker in black marker. The principal had it cleaned up, but the damage was done. I stopped sitting in the cafeteria. I started eating in the library, just to avoid the looks. It was ironic. I'd spent my whole life keeping my trauma private, and now it was out in the open for everyone to dissect, thanks to her. I told myself to hold on until graduation, that once high school was over, none of this would matter. But then, something happened that made everything spiral again. One afternoon, I got an email from a small local newspaper. The subject line said, "Follow-up inquiry, scholarship essay story." My heart dropped before I even opened it. The message said they were writing an article about academic integrity and plagiarism among local high schoolers and wanted to hear my side of the story. They even mentioned Jenna by name. Apparently, word had reached the press after someone posted about it anonymously online. I had no idea who. I didn't reply right away. I didn't want attention. But that night, the story went live anyway. It wasn't a full article, just a short online post, but it blew up fast. The headline was something like, "Local Student Loses Stanford Scholarship Over Copied Essay." It didn't name me, but the details were clear enough for everyone to figure it out. The comments were brutal. Half the people blamed Jenna for stealing, and the other half blamed me for ruining someone's dream. I logged off everything for a week. Then, a letter came in the mail with no return address. It was from Jenna. The handwriting was shaky, like she'd been crying while writing it. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't realize how much her essay would hurt me and that she thought if she made something good out of my pain, it would somehow make it worth something. She said losing Stanford felt like losing her identity, and that she couldn't forgive herself, but she also couldn't forgive me for telling on her. It was a mess of contradictions, and at the bottom, she wrote something that made my hands go cold. "I hope one day you'll understand that I wasn't stealing your story. I was trying to keep it alive." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it haunted me for days. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. I just kept it folded in my drawer, hidden under my textbooks. Graduation came and went quietly. My name was called, I shook hands, took the diploma, and left. Jenna's name was still printed in the program, but she didn't show up. After the ceremony, I saw her parents sitting alone at the back of the gym, avoiding eye contact with everyone. It was painful to watch. I thought that would be the last time I'd ever hear about her, but life has this way of reopening wounds you think have healed. 2 months later, I started college at a small state university. I was majoring in communications, living in a shared dorm, trying to rebuild some kind of normal. Things were finally settling down until one day, during orientation week, my phone buzzed with a notification from a writing forum I sometimes browsed. Someone had posted a short essay titled, "The Story I Stole." The username wasn't familiar, but when I started reading, my chest tightened instantly. It was Jenna's writing. I recognized her tone, her phrasing. The essay was about a girl who had borrowed someone else's tragedy and paid the price for it. It wasn't angry, it was hauntingly self-aware, raw, almost like an apology written in disguise. She wrote about feeling empty, about how she'd wanted to be someone worth remembering, and how she thought using someone else's pain might give her that meaning. And then, the last line hit me like a punch. The story was never mine to tell, but maybe telling it wrong taught me what it really meant. I must have read it a dozen times. It had thousands of likes and comments, people calling it powerful and honest. Some even said it should be published. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to message her, to say I read it. But I didn't. I just closed the page and sat there for a long time. Maybe she really had learned something. Maybe she was trying to make peace with it all. Or maybe it was just another way to rewrite the narrative, this time as a redemption arc. Either way, it stirred up everything I'd been trying to bury. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Because a few months later, something happened that made me realize Jenna wasn't done with my story yet, and this time, it wasn't just an essay. I didn't find out about the next thing Jenna did until nearly half a year after that writing forum post. By then, I'd settled into college life, new classes, new friends, new everything. I had tried hard to move on, to stop letting her take up space in my head. I'd even started journaling again, something I used to do when my mom was alive. Writing had always been how I made sense of things, but after what happened with Jenna, I couldn't touch a pen without hearing her voice saying, "That's beautiful, Ethan." Still, I was doing better. Until one afternoon, when my roommate, Dylan, came into our dorm holding his phone and said, "Dude, is this you?" I looked up, confused, and he turned his screen toward me. It was a TikTok clip of some girl giving a speech at what looked like a scholarship award ceremony. The caption said, "The Story I Stole author wins National Young Writers Competition." My chest tightened instantly. It was Jenna. Older, calmer, dressed differently, but still her. She was on stage reading from a piece that sounded awfully familiar. I turned up the volume, and as soon as she spoke, my stomach sank. She was reading lines straight from that same essay she'd posted months ago, the one about borrowing someone else's tragedy. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. She talked about redemption, about learning to take responsibility, about understanding the pain she caused. It was moving, I'll admit that. But what hit me hardest wasn't what she said, it was what she left out. She never mentioned my name, never acknowledged that there was a real person behind the story. Instead, she framed it as a fictionalized reflection, something she'd created to explore guilt and forgiveness. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause. Dylan said, "Man, that's deep," not knowing the backstory. I couldn't even speak. My heart was racing. I opened my laptop and searched her name. There it was, an article on a literary website praising her piece for its brutal honesty and emotional maturity. The judges called it a profound portrayal of redemption and accountability. I wanted to laugh at how twisted it was. She'd used my trauma to get into college, lost everything, then used the fallout from that to rebuild her image, and it worked. She was being rewarded again for telling my story, just framed differently. I didn't even feel angry at first, just numb. Like she'd won some game I didn't even know I was playing. Over the next few weeks, her name started popping up everywhere: interviews, podcasts, online articles about forgiveness and growth. In one interview, she said she was inspired by a friend from her past who taught her resilience, and that she'd made peace with that person. That one line destroyed me. I hadn't spoken to her since her letter. I hadn't forgiven her. She was rewriting history again, this time painting herself as the victim who found healing through introspection. People loved it. They loved her. And once again, I was invisible in my own story. I didn't want to go through it all again, but something inside me snapped. I needed to confront her, not publicly, not for revenge, but for closure. I found her email through her website, where she'd listed it for collaborations. I stared at the screen for hours before typing out a message. I told her I saw the video, that I'd read the essay, and that while I was glad she'd learned something, she still hadn't made things right. I told her that if she was really sorry, she'd stop using my story altogether. I ended it with, "You can't heal by keeping someone else's pain on display." I didn't expect a reply. But she did respond within an hour. Her email was long, emotional, full of excuses and explanations. She said she'd been in therapy, that writing was her way of processing guilt, that her new essay wasn't about me but about what she did. She claimed it was her story now too because she was the one who had to live with the consequences. I read that line over and over again, "It's my story too now." That sentence made my skin crawl. It was like she couldn't separate her own guilt from my grief. She said she wanted to meet, to apologize properly. At first, I ignored her. But she kept emailing, saying she just wanted a chance to talk, that it wasn't for publicity, that she genuinely wanted closure. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our colleges. I got there early and almost left twice before she walked in. She looked different, tired, thinner, older somehow, but her smile was the same careful, practiced one I remembered. She sat down and immediately started crying. She told me she'd been lost, that she'd messed up, that she didn't expect forgiveness but wanted me to know she finally understood what she took from me. I listened quietly, unsure if any of it was real. Then she said something that caught me off guard. She said she had been offered a book deal based on her essay, but she wanted to make things right before signing anything. I felt my chest tighten. A book deal. She said she planned to include me in it, not by name, but as the friend who changed her life. She said she'd share profits with me if I wanted. I just stared at her, stunned. I didn't want money. I wanted my story to be mine again. I told her that. She nodded, said she understood, said she'd think about not publishing at all. For a moment, I believed her. We even hugged when we left, and for the first time in years, I thought maybe this whole thing could finally be over. But a few months later, her book was announced. And my worst fears came true. It wasn't just inspired by what happened, it was what happened. My mom's illness, my words, my grief, all of it was in there, dressed up with new names and minor tweaks. It wasn't called The Story I Stole. It was called The Friend Who Saved Me. The publisher described it as an intimate exploration of friendship, loss, and forgiveness. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause. Dylan said, "Man, that's deep," not knowing the backstory. I couldn't even speak. My heart was racing. I opened my laptop and searched her name. There it was, an article on a literary website praising her piece for its brutal honesty and emotional maturity. The judges called it a profound portrayal of redemption and accountability. I wanted to laugh at how twisted it was. She'd used my trauma to get into college, lost everything, then used the fallout from that to rebuild her image, and it worked. She was being rewarded again for telling my story, just framed differently. I didn't even feel angry at first, just numb. Like she'd won some game I didn't even know I was playing. Over the next few weeks, her name started popping up everywhere: interviews, podcasts, online articles about forgiveness and growth. In one interview, she said she was inspired by a friend from her past who taught her resilience, and that she'd made peace with that person. That one line destroyed me. I hadn't spoken to her since her letter. I hadn't forgiven her. She was rewriting history again, this time painting herself as the victim who found healing through introspection. People loved it. They loved her. And once again, I was invisible in my own story. I didn't want to go through it all again, but something inside me snapped. I needed to confront her, not publicly, not for revenge, but for closure. I found her email through her website, where she'd listed it for collaborations. I stared at the screen for hours before typing out a message. I told her I saw the video, that I'd read the essay, and that while I was glad she'd learned something, she still hadn't made things right. I told her that if she was really sorry, she'd stop using my story altogether. I ended it with, "You can't heal by keeping someone else's pain on display." I didn't expect a reply. But she did respond within an hour. Her email was long, emotional, full of excuses and explanations. She said she'd been in therapy, that writing was her way of processing guilt, that her new essay wasn't about me but about what she did. She claimed it was her story now too because she was the one who had to live with the consequences. I read that line over and over again, "It's my story too now." That sentence made my skin crawl. It was like she couldn't separate her own guilt from my grief. She said she wanted to meet, to apologize properly. At first, I ignored her. But she kept emailing, saying she just wanted a chance to talk, that it wasn't for publicity, that she genuinely wanted closure. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our colleges. I got there early and almost left twice before she walked in. She looked different, tired, thinner, older somehow, but her smile was the same careful, practiced one I remembered. She sat down and immediately started crying. She told me she'd been lost, that she'd messed up, that she didn't expect forgiveness but wanted me to know she finally understood what she took from me. I listened quietly, unsure if any of it was real. Then she said something that caught me off guard. She said she had been offered a book deal based on her essay, but she wanted to make things right before signing anything. I felt my chest tighten. A book deal. She said she planned to include me in it, not by name, but as the friend who changed her life. She said she'd share profits with me if I wanted. I just stared at her, stunned. I didn't want money. I wanted my story to be mine again. I told her that. She nodded, said she understood, said she'd think about not publishing at all. For a moment, I believed her. We even hugged when we left, and for the first time in years, I thought maybe this whole thing could finally be over. But a few months later, her book was announced. And my worst fears came true. It wasn't just inspired by what happened, it was what happened. My mom's illness, my words, my grief, all of it was in there, dressed up with new names and minor tweaks. It wasn't called The Story I Stole. It was called The Friend Who Saved Me. The publisher described it as an intimate exploration of friendship, loss, and forgiveness. I didn't even have to read it to know what it was. And this time, it wasn't just an essay for school, it was a published book that was about to hit stores nationwide. My phone started blowing up again. Old classmates sent me links saying, "Isn't this about you?" I couldn't believe it. After everything, she had done it again, but on a bigger scale. I thought about lawyers, about suing her, but I didn't even know where to start. Part of me didn't want to go through another public mess. But part of me also couldn't just let her win again. And that's when I decided if she was going to tell my story, then I would too. But this time, in my own words, and not hidden behind hers. The night Jenna's book was released, I sat in my dorm room staring at the glowing screen, my name trending in local circles again even though I wasn't mentioned anywhere in the book. People who knew both of us didn't need confirmation, they recognized the details immediately. My mom's job at the flower shop, the grocery store where I worked after school, the phrase "silence was the only thing that didn't leave me," she'd used them all. Again. This time polished, marketed, and bound in glossy hardcover with a photo of her on the back smiling like she'd conquered her demons. I ordered a copy, not because I wanted to support her, but because I needed to see for myself what she had done. When it arrived, I opened it slowly, feeling this strange mix of dread and curiosity. The dedication read, "For the friend who taught me what it means to be brave." That single line made my stomach twist. Every page felt like an invasion, every sentence a reminder that I had shared too much with someone who never deserved to hold it. The story followed Lena, a girl who lost her mother and confided in her best friend Eli. Except in her version, she was the one who experienced the pain, and Eli was the one who inspired her. She'd rewritten history again, flipping the roles to make herself the grieving one, the survivor, the hero. She even used details about my mom's final days almost word for word. I had to stop reading halfway through. It was like watching someone repaint a memory of mine in colors I hated. For days, I couldn't focus. My classes slipped, my work shifts blurred together. Every time I thought I could forget it, someone new would tag me on a post saying, "Hey, this reminds me of your story," or "Didn't your friend write a book about this?" And the comments were full of praise for her raw vulnerability. It felt like being erased in real time. I knew I had two choices: let her story replace mine forever or finally take back what was mine. So I started writing. Not an essay, not a rant, but the truth, exactly how it happened from my side. Every detail I could remember. Every emotion I'd buried. I wrote about my mom's illness, about how I trusted Jenna, how she'd turned my pain into profit, how she'd said she wanted to keep my story alive while stealing it piece by piece. I didn't make it angry or cruel, I just made it honest. It took weeks, sometimes months, because it hurt to relive it all, but I kept going. When I was done, I didn't send it to a publisher. I posted it online on the same writing forum where she had posted The Story I Stole. I titled mine The Story She Kept Stealing. I didn't use her name. I didn't need to. The readers would see the truth for themselves. The response was overwhelming. It blew up overnight. People shared it, commented things like, "This hit harder than any essay I've read," and "I can't believe someone could actually do this." Some recognized the connection immediately, linking it to her book, and soon enough, it was everywhere: Twitter, TikTok, even a few news blogs picking it up as a viral story about literary betrayal. For the first time, the story wasn't hers anymore, it was mine again. A week later, I got an email from her publisher. They said they were reviewing claims of factual overlap and wanted to discuss potential resolutions. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I hadn't even tried to get legal attention, but it found me anyway. Within days, her book started getting review bombed online. She turned off her comments, deactivated her socials again, and just like that, the applause stopped. I heard she lost the follow-up contract and that the publisher quietly pulled some promotional material while they investigated. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel triumphant. I mostly felt tired. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and was finally allowed to exhale. I thought that was the end of it, but a month later, I got one last message from her. It wasn't long, just a few lines. She said she finally understood that she couldn't make herself look better by using someone else's pain. She said she'd stopped writing completely. And at the end, she wrote, "I hope you tell your story, Ethan. The real one. Because it's beautiful and it's yours." I sat there reading it, unsure if it was another manipulation or genuine closure. But for the first time, I didn't need her to define it for me. I didn't reply. Instead, I kept writing. Over time, my post turned into something bigger, an essay series about ownership, truth, and boundaries. It got attention, but not the viral kind Jenna always chased. The quiet kind. The kind that makes people think. I eventually published a small book, not about her, not about revenge, but about my mom, my healing, and how telling your story isn't about who listens, but about reclaiming your voice when someone tries to take it. A year later, I got invited to speak at a local college about creative ethics. Standing there, telling my truth without filters, I realized something I wish I'd known all along. People can borrow your words, mimic your pain, or twist your past, but they can never live it. And that's the difference. That's the one thing she never understood. My story wasn't powerful because it was tragic, it was powerful because I survived it. I walked off that stage feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won some moral victory, but because I'd finally let it go. Jenna's name faded from the headlines, her book forgotten, but every now and then, I still think of her, not with hate, but with a strange kind of understanding. Maybe she really did want to keep my story alive. Maybe in some twisted way, she did. But now, it lives where it always should have, inside me, in my words, in my own voice. My story, finally mine again.